Buenas tardes. Good afternoon. Guten Tag. Truland True. Hello and welcome. This is Movers and Shakers bringing you the lowdown on the most recent episode of Star Trek Lower Decks. Halfway through the season. I am your host, Chris Pabon, long absent but finally returned, and I am joined, as always, with my co-host, Josh Pritchett. Josh?
Nah. Live long and prosper, and welcome to all Federation starships in the Alpha, Beta, Gamma, and Delta quadrants. So, Chris,
I've been gone for a while.
yes, you have been. We've been missing you terribly.
Thank you. Well,
Yes, I hope everything is going well for you.
it is, Josh. I embarked on a stay of reflection and meditation, and I came to the conclusion that I am Vulcan as a mofo.
Yes, I could have told you that you are indeed as Vulcan as a mofo. I have big news. I just won the Powerball last night.
Ooh.
Okay, fine. I only won $4. But the point is, ladies and gentlemen, and all others, I won.
You won the Powerball. That's it. They
Yes.
cannot take that from you.
They cannot. No. Yes, $4 whole is mine. Yes, a vast fortune, I'm sure.
So, Josh, we're at the halfway mark. What did you think of the episode overall?
I loved it. I've been very happy with this entire season thus far of Lower Decks. We are now getting some meat on the bones of who this new enemy is. I think we have our suspicions, which we will go over in the predictions later on. But I think before we get to that, we might want to go ahead and recap this week's episode. What do you think, Chris?
I think so. We start out with the crew of the Cerritos taking a trio of what appears to be Beta-Set diplomats to the planet Risa. And they appear to be continuing their partying ways, which they started previously in Planet Angel. But there is more to this trio of ladies than meets the eye, as we will see. Although they are having some merriment with the crew, such as when Ransom gets hit on, and then he gets rejected because he doesn't play hard to get. And then Captain Freeman is also slightly being hit on, and she says he's married, and the question is like, so where is your husband? Is he stationed on the ship? So there's a lot of merriment going on. That is one of the stories that's happening. The other sub story that's happening throughout the episode is with Mr. Boimler, who the ensigns of command. He is feeling the weight of his duties as a lieutenant junior grade, and he is trying to figure out how he can remember the names of everyone in the crew, because everyone in the crew is important since he has to lead by example. And this worries Rutherford, and Rutherford contacts Zach saying, we have a candidate for the program. And we'll get into what the program is in just a few minutes. And meanwhile, the crew seems very happy, perhaps a little happier than they should be, except one person, and that is T'Lyn. And T'Lyn is not quite getting ready to beg her previous captain for her position back, because that would be an emotional outburst, and that is not common for Vulcans. But T'Lyn is composing a note to send to her captain saying how, she will just forego all of her emotional outbursts, and she will just be purely Vulcan and logical from this point out. And because the frustrations of being on this human ship is really beginning to get to her, and she tries to send the communication, and it's a no-go. And she tries again, much like many of us when we try to send an email and it's not going. And so she finds out from Mariner that they are on a communications blackout because of these events that have been mentioned throughout the season of ships getting attacked. They want to make sure these Betazoids get to Risa. And so nothing goes out until they've taken the Betazoids there. And so her frustration is just increasing, and she says to herself, well, maybe it'd be logical if I go join the crew, who she knows is partying in 10 forward, and ask them when I might be able to send this message. So it's a lot of pent-up frustration, but not at 10 forward. Josh, want to continue from there?
Yes, thank you, Chris. And so getting down to 10 forward, the Betazoid ladies have decided that it's Romulan 8 o'clock, or as we say in Klingon, Romulan Hech Kolampur. And so now everybody in Tenford is partying like it's 1999. The ship's counselor has decided to destroy the replicator because it's not making regurgitated soup in a way that tastes like it just came from his mother's mouth. Suddenly, Captain Freeman realizes that the crew is being a little too out of control, and she and Mariner decide that maybe they ought to think about putting everybody in the brig. Well, actually, Mariner says that everybody should be put in the brig, including herself, because until she gets herself under control. Luckily, it seems as though that the Beta Zeds seem to be in a little bit more control. So Freeman has a suspicion, so they take them back down to sickbay, where Dr. Talar begins to examine them for what is known as Xanath fever. Now, for those of you who remember Deep Space Nine, Xanath fever was first encountered in the episode Fascination, in which Loxana was sort of having a midlife crisis and her telepathic control was, shall we say, compromised. Everybody was kind of feeling a lot more depressed or exuberant or what have you. And so they think that's what's going on. But when Dr. Talar examines them, it turns out that they don't actually have traces of Xanath fever. So the Beta Zeds suddenly start doing a whole bunch of like kickboxing and subdue Mariner, T'Lyn, and Dr. Talar, and also capture Captain Freeman. And they decide they're going to take control of the bridge. And it turns out that our Beta Zed guests are not in fact diplomats, but are actually from Beta Zed intelligence, and are basically been trying to find information about these starships that have been suddenly being destroyed all across the quadrant. Well, meanwhile, everybody in 10 Forward is still kind of high on life. And Boimler is in this special security area where the security team is hanging out. And it's not as all kick butt excitement as he expected. Most of them are just hanging out, performing slam poetry, playing charades. And Boimler's kind of disappointed because he's hoping that there was going to be some real intense security training. And yet it seems like it's just kind of a low-key party down there. Well, very low-key compared to what's going on at 10 Forward at the moment. So, meanwhile, the Beta Zeds managed to take control of the bridge and decided to set a course back to Betazoid, but cutting through the neutral zone because for some reason the neutral zone seems to be a shortcut to everywhere. I cannot explain this. And back at sickbay, Talar manages to free herself and T'Lyn and Mariner, but then goes running off, possibly to eat the Beta Zeds, because we found out Talar's people used to hunt the Beta Zeds for food. Meanwhile, her tricorder's been left working, and it has detected that the source of the emotional imbalance is, in fact, T'Lyn. Chris.
So this comes as a huge surprise because T'Lyn and Mariner were certain that it had to be the Beta Zeds, and so they go to 10 Forward and they inform everyone that T'Lyn is the person responsible for this, which causes everyone to try to go after T'Lyn. So T'Lyn and Mariner have to take refuge in a room. Meanwhile, the people who are not affected by this are the security team, because they are deep within the ship on supposedly shielded area. And as you indicated, it's Boimler thought it was going to be a lot different dealing with security, but they seem rather low key and not the security that he envisioned, like going all out and protecting people. But in the meanwhile, the trio of Beta Z intelligence officers are trying to maneuver the ship to, as you said, to the neutral zone. And Captain Freeman realizes that he's got to stop this. And so she very cleverly devises a plan to turn them against one another, because at the very start of the episode, when one of the beta searchers was hitting on Ransom, the other commented to her just off on the side a criticism of one of the beta Zeds. So she says, "Oh, you know, I've got all this intelligence." And they're like, "What intelligence?" And she says, "No, no, I don't want you to read my mind." And so one of them reads her mind and sees the criticism of her made by the other. And then that causes the beta Zeds to quarrel amongst themselves, at which point she can reach over and activate the red alert. Meanwhile, trapped in the room with the crew wanting to, like, get to them at all costs, there's a heart-to-heart between T'Lyn and Mariner, and T'Lyn just says, like, it's just, maybe I'm just not a Vulcan, because I've been sent away by my people, like an outcast, and and here I'm causing troubles too, through Bendai syndrome. What am I? And at that point, Mariner says, "Listen, so you say you have Bendai syndrome. Guess who else had Bendai syndrome? Like, Sarek had Bendai system, and Sarek was Vulcan as a mofo. So if you have Bendai syndrome, that means you too, my friend, are as Vulcan as a mofo," which I am sure is going to appear now in numerous T-shirts henceforth. I'm going to get one. And faced with this logic, T'Lyn has to admit, yes, I am Vulcan. The facts show that I am very much a Vulcan. And so that causes her anxiety that had been pent up about being in the ship, not being able to send the message. And how many of us have been there trying to hit send an email that just will not go through? And so her anxiety levels begin to slow down. And so the Bendai syndrome also begins to regress. This is noted in the tricorder, and they open the door, and people are a little less like wanting to kill them, basically. And so meanwhile, the red alert goes on, and security snaps into effect, and Boimler sees something that he didn't think was possible. Like, this is a unit that may be quiet, but they are dedicated, they are intense, and he sees them drop the slam poetry. They're grabbing their phasers, their phaser rifles. They're heading off in a sprint, and he just can't believe this. Like, what? These people are so, like, laid back, and what's happening now? They're so intense. And so they capture Dr. Talon. They make it onto the bridge, and they retake the bridge, which again goes back to my eternal criticism. Like, how easy is it to take over the bridge in a starship? But at least these are trained personnel. And like the beta soldiers try to get into this mind of one of them, and they say, "You're blank. I can't influence you." And she just looks at him and says, "Slam poetry," and they take back the ship. And afterwards, like, Boimler is in amazement, and Zax tells him, "Listen, baby bear, you have to understand that Avio security is not only protecting from external threats, it's also protecting people from internal threats, and sometimes themselves. And we saw that you're putting too much effort on yourself to try to memorize all the names and to be a good lieutenant junior grade. But you've got to take things in stride, and that's why we wanted to bring you in to our activities to help you cool down a bit." So we can talk about this later. I love the idea of external versus internal threats. And the Beta Zeds are very grateful to Captain Freeman, and as a token of how grateful they are, they give her a photo that one of the intelligence satellites or drones managed to take of the mystery ship that is destroying ships throughout the quadrant. And scene for another fun. Oh, I almost forgot. Excuse me. There's a final scene at the bar again, and T'Lyn and Mariner are talking, and Mariner actually gets a hug from T'Lyn, and to which Tendi comes and says, "I want a hug too," and she's like, "No, sorry, only one hug." And then scene. Great episode.
Great episode. Yeah, I think that this had a lot of great stuff, and I think it moved the overall episode season. The main thing, which has been the starship that's been attacking ships throughout the beta and alpha quadrants. I think it's moved that plot line along quite nicely. We're starting to get some ideas here, which we'll talk about more in the predictions. But I think we can, and I really enjoyed, Zax's whole thing about security, which I want to talk more about here now as we get into the good, the bad, and the Gorn. So, Chris, what did you think was best about this episode?
I like the idea of calm versus chaos. I like that Tillin and all of this was just like the calm center, and it allowed her a moment to shine. And that's what I'm really liking about this season. It's very character driven. So her emotions, or you know, yes, we have to call them emotions. How she feels about being rejected by her captain, sent to this foreign ship, and having to deal with the chaos that we see that just surrounds the Cerritos. And you know her calm, and then the idea of her actually being the cause of all the chaos around, and like her realization that yes, he is a Vulcan, despite what everything seems to be around her, or people are telling her. So I thought that was a nice bit of a character maturity. And speaking of maturity, I also liked how the sub story was about Boimler, and like how he's struggling because he's now a lieutenant junior grade. He's no longer the lowest of the lowest in the totem pole. And once you begin climbing up the ladder, there are responsibilities, and how he is putting perhaps too heavy a burden on him, and how sometimes it takes people on the outside to bring us in and say, hey, like, you need to calm down. Or sometimes there's some things we can't see ourselves that others can see. So much like Mariner telling Lynn, you're Vulcan as a mofo. I like the message here that sometimes you do need some help from others. So that was a good message, I thought, throughout the episode.
Yeah, I thought that was good, the self actualization, because I think, and I want to talk more about this in the Gorn section, about how how Vulcan logic has become so much more complicated, and even how Vulcans sort of see themselves, and how after nearly 200 years of being part of the Federation at this point, you know, do Vulcans need to reconsider, is logic the end all be all of everything? Because many of them, as we've seen going all the way back to Enterprise and Ambassador Saval, admitting that, yes, humans have moved beyond us in so many ways, and yet they don't embrace logic by every measurable sense. They should be still behind us, and yet they discovered how to get to warp 5 faster than we did. So yeah, and I think that's made a lot of Vulcans sort of question themselves. I mean, are we really, the end all be all of everything? And I think, T'Lyn has to sort of realize in herself that, yeah, there are limitations to logic, as Spock has discovered, and as Tuvok and other Vulcan characters we've had on Star Trek over the last 50 plus years have come to understand. I think that self-actualization thing also goes into Boimler, which I thought was good. That, hey, wait a minute, you don't need to put all that pressure on yourself. You need to sort of step back, um, and you need to kind of, give yourself a break. Need to give yourself time to learn this stuff, because if you don't, you're not going to be a very good officer. Which is, again, something we saw in this past season on Star Trek Strange New Worlds, when Una was explaining that to Kirk, that you have to, you can't shut yourself off from your crew like that. You have to, you have to care. You have to show them that you actually do care about them. Another thing I really liked is the progressive style that Jacques shows for law enforcement and security in general. We talk about here in the 21st century about how we the public seem to be having a very negative feeling towards law enforcement, and law enforcement looks at everybody else as like, okay, you're the enemy. We're in this war on crime, and everybody could be the enemy. And yet Zax is not seeing it that way, that he's taking this holistic approach to security, and that, okay, we've got to protect everybody from invasions, but we've got to protect everybody else's mental health too. We need to be the first line. And that's something what we see in the real world. People talk about is how police either need to be trained more in mental health mitigation, or we need to have, designated, social services support ready to step in to to help people who are mentally distressed, who sometimes are seen as a threat by law enforcement. I thought that was very progressive. Um, I love the fact that we kind of had the whole callback to um, Zanti fever and Bendai syndrome, which are generally mental illnesses or that seem to affect older Betazets and Vulcans. Obviously, the Betazets were not, but I think with Talin suddenly realizing she might have the onset of Bendai syndrome, we're discovering in the real world again that Alzheimer's is not just a thing that happens later in life. It's now becoming more obvious that it can start much younger. And as Talin pointed out, she is quite young for a Vulcan. She's only 62 years old, uh, which would be very young by Vulcan standards. So that does leave me to wonder how old is Spock exactly? But, I mean, he must still be very relatively young because we know he dies around the age of 200 in the Kelvin timeline. So, what else did you like, Chris?
Betazoid brisket. Aside from Vulcan as a mofo, the idea of Betazoid brisket, and why not? I mean, her species. There are cats. Cats do hunt. So, like a few hundred years ago, the idea of they hunted Betazoids, perfectly plausible. They might have hunted Dr. Magulu's species as well. But the idea of Betazoid brisket was made me laugh. That was, and I also like the idea of Betazoid intelligence. Yeah, sure, we've never heard of them before, and maybe they came up after the Dominion took over Betazed. But we hear so much about the Romulan Intelligence Agency. We hear so much about
Vulcan?
the Obsidian Order, but up until now, we've never heard of Betazoid intelligence. But why not? Like, why shouldn't they exist? So, you know, that's again what I like so much about the show, that they sometimes introduce something that, why, yeah, it probably does exist, but just because we've never heard of it before doesn't mean it's not there. So, I like that quite a bit.
Yeah, and some other intelligence groups, of course, Section 31, which we had never heard of until Deep Space Nine. Of course, it seems like, they come up a lot. And of course, we had Vulcan intelligence, which was mentioned in the episode Gambit Part 2 on Next Generation. Um, Obviously, as Odo once pointed out in Deep Space Nine, all the great powers have had some sort of intelligence or secret police. It's not surprising we've just never heard of them, because sometimes in a democracy, I guess the best security organization is the ones you never heard of. So, or you've
I,
only heard rumors of.
I also want to say I also enjoyed the usually calm and collected Dr. McGilmore just taking out that phaser and going after the replicator. Because again, who of us have not been in front of like a dispenser, and we put in our dollar or our quarters, for those of you who might be a little bit older than as I am, and like put in like E3, and that thing never comes out.
Yeah, there's that. And also, though, we do not endorse attacking vending machines of any
True,
type
yes.
here, folks, on movers
Yes.
and shakers. That's
Yes, we do not endorse this, but we
no.
understand.
Yes. So, yeah, but we've all had that frustration. I mean, like your credit, not accepting your debit card because the chip is messed up, or yeah, we've all been there, and I think that's purely human thing to do. And it's also a purely Klingon thing to do. Not saying I've actually destroyed public property. Well, not on this planet anyway, but you get my drift, folks. So, anything you didn't like about this episode?
So, I love me low decks, so it is hard for me to say I disliked anything. But I mean, I sort of, I mean, I understand why they wanted to show that you can have at an early age an influx of mental illness, but giving to Len Bendai syndrome at the young age of 62 was a little dark.
Yeah, I that could be. I mean, I'm full disclosure here. I'm not in my 30s anymore, folks. No matter how good I might be maintaining, but there are times I've started to wonder about my own mental health. Um, my own memory, because Alzheimer's is a very real thing in my family, and I've worried myself about whether or not I might contract it. So yeah, that is kind of very dark, but fortunately there are tests, there are new treatments, so people should really look into that. But yeah, you're right, that was kind of a little bit dark and was kind of offsetting, but I don't think that was, I think it was interesting. So is this going to be a subplot though that's going to carry on with Talin throughout her time on the Cerritos, do you think?
I don't know. I mean, again, I like how they raise the issue of like you can have, mental illness at an early age. But it was just it was a little dark. I did not expect that. I mean, but at the same time, it would have been too easy just to say, oh, it's the Betazoids and they have like, and they have Zanti fever. So this actually, story wise, I think enhanced the story. But um, will it pop up again? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Another reason to continue watching.
Oh yes. Well, there's tons of reasons to continue watching. Um, I kind of would not mind, and it's not necessarily bad, but it's a peeve. I would not mind the whole thing about the mystery ship moving a little bit faster. Um, Kind of hoping they're not going to wrap it all up in just the last episode, at least. But I mean, given the history of the past 3 seasons, it will be at least the last 2 episodes that they really get into it and really wrap it up. So um, that was something that I was impressed with. But again, I wouldn't mind if it went a little faster. Um, Otherwise, no, nothing really bad. I think overall it's solid writing. I mean, I think the writing has been solid. I think uh, the fan service is quite good. I mean, because at this point, you've got a lot of fan service between this and other franchises, that a lot of callbacks. And that's the thing, is that, Lower Decks is a fan show for Star Trek fans. So, and so moving on to the Gorn, I think I brought up the whole thing about how it would be nice if, modern police had as progressive an outlook on law enforcement and people suffering mental health problems as Zax does. What was your big Gorn moment here this week?
So the big going moment for me was the spotlight on Lin, and while they make it seem effortless, but they've integrated a whole new character into a cast that has been humming along for 3 seasons. I mean, this could have been disruptive. I mean, this could have been much more negative than positive. But with the halfway mark and the integration of the Tlin character has been seamless. And it really has enhanced the show. I mean, it hasn't taken away screen time from anyone. If anything, it just seems like the entire show has benefited immensely from the addition of this new character, new perspectives that can generate new storylines, as we've seen right now. So, for me, it's like how successfully they have managed to integrate a whole new character into the show. This could have gone sideways very badly, but it has not.
Yeah, I like Talent also. I think that, usually when you're bringing in a new character, it's a sign of like, okay, we've run out of ideas with the older characters, but we have to keep the show going. So let's bring in this new character. And that ends up dragging the show down, and the dynamic we had between the characters before that people liked is completely thrown off because they're trying to integrate this, like, examples I have about, like, say, the Brady Bunch, or uh you know, other shows like that, where, in the last couple of seasons they brought in this other character who was going
Cousin
to,
whoever.
yeah, right, exactly, the cousin, and that never quite works out. But I think Talen coming in and being so seamless, um, because she's already, I think, very much entered into the banter and become part of the chemistry of the show. Um, and it's pretty clear that, you know there's more to her than even she realizes at this point. And she's not just a fifth wheel. she is a fifth character, and her chemistry is quickly bonded with Mariner and everybody else, and I think that's a good sign. I really felt like she and Mariner actually had a kind of a Spock Kirk moment there, because it was like, I felt like there was like the same kind of chemistry you always saw between them in the original series. Um, because you had the incredibly emotional Mariner with the incredibly logical Tallinn, and them having to work together and figure out what the problem was.
True.
And yeah, I mean, that was definitely an homage to Kirk and Spock right there. Um, and I think that, I wonder, okay, is this, the direction they're going to go in with both characters, that they're going to be, that Tallinn is going to be Spock to Mariner's Kirk? Is that we're going to see happen? Uh, Although, I think that, yeah, I think that could be a possibility going forward. We'll see what happens. But I think, as we get into predictions here, I'm going to make a prediction. I think we're going to see Tallinn's former captain come back, and he's going to reveal that he didn't send Tallinn to Starfleet as a punishment. It was because she proved that she was somewhat beyond logic, and that there was more to her than just staying aboard a Vulcan spaceship, that she really needed to go further than other Vulcans, that there was more to her, and she needed to find that for herself. And that there was more to her than being on a Vulcan exploration vessel, and Starfleet was a better choice for her.
Possible.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go a little bit more mainstream in my predictions, and I think the entity that has been blowing away ships. And by the way, at some point, you're right. With the second half of the season, and they've already attacked an Orion ship, they've already attacked a Vulcan ship, a Romulan ship. So unless the next Klingon ship, unless the next one up on the menu is a Cardassian or Ferengi, we're beginning to run out of ships. I guess they could attack the Packlets, but would anyone care? No. I think they just attack superior technology. I think it's going to be Peanut Hamper.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's going to be Peanut Hamper and Jeffrey Combs's character. I think
Agamas.
Agamas. I think they're going to be coming back, and clearly they are really big baddies, and it seems like AI is kind of having this dark moment right now, where it's not necessarily the best thing, even though people still love, obviously characters like Data and C-3PO, but some AI, I think it's very popular. I mean, especially what we've had with the writer's strike, and which I will mention here when we get towards some Star Trek news. But that was one of the key complaints, was AI stepping in and writing, the fear that it would take over writing jobs.
Well, I mean, technology has been used by larger entities to remove jobs to us to increase the bottom line. So, I mean, the fact is, we all are using AI in our Photoshop, or we're using it to some extent in, let's say, in our if we create a web page. But when you reach a point, which I think we have, and I'm glad the writer's strike illustrated this, that with ChatGPT, where you can have things create content. Of course, corporations see this as golden. Like, we don't have to pay someone, we don't have to pay benefits, we don't need to hire actors. We can, which is what the actors are complaining about right now, rightfully so. We can just scan their image once and put them into the background forever. No catering service, we lessen our expenses, but you can't stop the advancement of technology, but you can certainly put in regulations in place so that corporations and larger entities don't take advantage of this just to eliminate jobs.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as a writer myself, I do kind of like the idea of AI telling me, okay, put a comma here, or this word is misspelled, or you might want to try this word instead. I don't mind that, but I don't want AI to step in and write my story for me.
Right.
That's,
The assist and enhance is fine. It's the taking over is not fine.
yes, exactly. So, anyway, as mentioned, I do have some exciting, some interesting news in the world of Star Trek. Of course, the big one, the writer's strike looks like it's over. The membership is voting on a new contract that should hopefully answer the majority of its wants. The big one, of course, was not having AI just step in and write scripts. So that's a good thing for the writers, and hopefully they will continue to receive residuals. Um, Patrick Stewart did an interview this week where he revealed the alternate ending of Picard. The alternate ending was Picard would be standing out in his vineyards at the Chateau Picard with his dog number one, and suddenly a woman's voice from off camera would shout, "Jean-Luc, dinner," and Picard would start walking back to the house, contented and satisfied, and the show would have ended there. But it would have been ambiguous as to who it would have been. Would it have been Lars, or would it have been Beverly? That
No.
part we didn't know, although Patrick did say that his real life wife was the one who was actually recording the voiceover. But because Patrick just expressed the idea that he wanted Jean-Luc to find love at the end, and that be the twilight. Speaking personally, I really liked the ending they went with the Next Generation crew playing
Yes.
poker one more time.
Yes.
Although Patrick Stewart has said that he would like to come back and do one more movie, not necessarily a Next Generation movie, but one in which it would basically put the final period on Picard, and he wants Jonathan Frakes to direct it. So there's that. Now, on the subject of the writers, the screenwriter or previous screenwriter for Star Trek 4 in the Kelvin timeline has said that Star Trek 4 is a go. J.J. Abrams has said that they are still working on it. Although apparently not much has been moved on it. However, Zoe Saldana has said that it's a matter of getting schedules lined up, while Zachary Quinto has said that he felt like there was a lot of different agendas going on, but hoped that they would get into production on it. Unfortunately, both the director and the head screenwriter have previously exited for different projects, because even though Paramount keeps saying Star Trek 4 is a go and it is a priority for them, there's been a lot of delays. Okay, and moving to Star Trek Legacy. Terry Mathis, who was the showrunner on Picard, has not been signed, and apparently the window might be closing on that. They are not sure whether or not they want to go forward with it, although huge numbers of fans have written in saying they would love a Legacy series. It was hinted at the end of Picard. Right now, all Paramount is saying that they are going forward on the Section 31 movie and a Starfleet Academy show, which is supposed to take the place of the recently canceled Star Trek Prodigy. I've had a lot of feelings about that, which I could get into somewhere else. Also, if you are needing an additional Lower Decks fix before next week's episode, might I recommend the Lower Decks 4-issue collected miniseries from IDW Comics, in which Mariner and the gang accidentally give Dracula sentience, and meanwhile Captain Freeman and Zax and Dr. Talon Dr. Talar are trapped on a planet with two widely different alien species. And also, if you are needing more of a comic book fix, also a Lower Decks fix, our favorite Bajoran security chief, Zax, is going to be featured in an upcoming issue of Star Trek Day of Blood. For those of you who are not familiar with Day of Blood, it is a miniseries also from IDW in which Kahless II is attempting to conquer not just the Klingon Empire, but the entire galaxy. Both are again published by IDW, And issues are available at your local comic book store. Day of Blood is hopefully going to be in a bound trade paperback later this year. Chris, you got any other interesting Star Trek news you want to share before we sign off?
I got good news and I got bad news, people. The good news is Patrick Stewart's book tour starts, and he is scheduled to make a stop with Politics and Prose in Washington, D.C. The bad news is that all the tickets are sold out.
Boo!
Yes.
Yes.
And yes, the Lower Decks comic book, that was a great 4-issue storyline. Please do go ahead and pick up the soft cover. You will like it very much.
Yeah, it was terrific. It was hard for me to put down, and it does give you a really good. If you are a huge fan, which we assume you are because you're tuned in to watch our show, you are obviously, every Lower Decks fan ought to be buying it and sharing it with friends. And also, Chris, hold up your shirt a little bit here. I've been looking at that. I've been quite envy. I've been an Orion green with envy.
There you go. We can do it.
Yes, we can. And where did you get that? Shameless plug here.
That was a gift from my friends Kathy and Eric. Shout out to them if they're watching. They live in Illinois now. Thank you very much. I love the shirt. And yes, we can do it.
I love it too. And I don't know. I think I may have to get one of those, double XL. But anyone's watching. In the meantime, we have still not heard any news yet about Shore Leave and Farpoint, where they're going to be moving, and hopefully that they will resolve this very quickly. Farpoint is featuring Tawny Newsome, Lieutenant Junior Grade Beckett Mariner is going to be the featured guest at Farpoint this February. So hopefully we will be able to get everything lined up, and we'll get a new hotel very soon. The Townsend Hunt Valley Inn, which has hosted both Shore Leave and Farpoint and other conventions like NostalgiaCon and others, is closing down at the end of October. And regrettably, a lot of us who've been long time guests at both conventions are going to miss it terribly. So,
Yeah, and stay tuned. We may have a special episode, or we might be in our sister program, The Weekend Review, talking about the closure of Hunt Valley and where do people move from there. Literally move.
Right. So, okay, folks. Well, if we didn't have a chance to get to your comments today, we're very sorry, but we hope that, of course, we'll be up on YouTube, so please feel free to comment to us on there. Let us know what your thoughts were on this week's episode or previous episodes. Very glad that, Chris, you've gotten back to us and you've returned and are being rested and refreshed.
Those Honduran sheets, they do wonders.
Yes, and as well as your trip to Risa. Oh wait, I'm sorry. I wasn't supposed to talk about that. Sorry.
It's okay. What happens in Risa stays at Risa.
Stays at Risa. Yes, folks. Yes. Don't forget that. Okay, well, until next week, I am Josh Pritchett. You can find me at the Northern Virginia Star Trek Meetup group, which I am the head of, and that's on meetup.org. Or on my Facebook page, Josh Pritchett Jr. on Facebook. And we also have a Facebook presence for the Northern Virginia Star Trek Meetup group there. If you're interested in joining, you can reach out to me through there and just answer our secret questions. Chris?
Thank you. I am Chris Pabon. Peace and long life. You can find me at Verde Cosplay. And also a huge shout out to my hermanos y hermanas, because this is Hispanic month. So we are the second largest ethnic population in the United States. There's a lot to celebrate about our culture and our history. So saludos para todos.
Yes. And yes, and there are many fantastic cast members of Star Trek of Hispanic descent, and most notably Zoe Saldana and Ricardo Montalban and many others. So
Con!
So please continue to support their work, and happy Hispanic Heritage Month to all of our friends and family. So on that note, live long and prosper, everyone. See you next week. Life.